This week we read the portion of Toldos. Ve'ela Toldos Yitzchak ben Avram. And this is the Toldos, the Chronicles of Yitzchak, the son of Avram. Avram Holedus Yitzchak. So the Torah introduces the portion, the first pasuk. This is the Chronicles of Yitzchak, the son of Avram. Okay, so we know who's Yitzchak, son of Avram. Then the pasuk includes Avram Holedus Yitzchak, and Avram fathered Yitzchak. So the obvious question is, if Yitzchak is the son of Avram, it's evident that who fathered Yitzchak? Avram. So what does the pasuk conclude? Avram Holedus Yitzchak. Okay, that's Rashi cites the Chazal. It's the Midrash. But the Orach Chaim HaKodesh addresses the Vav. The Vav is always a connecting letter. The Eila and this is, or these are, the Chronicles of Yitzchak ben Avram. It could have said Eila. What's Ve'ela? Ve'ela is a continuation. What is the Vav connoting over here? So he explains that among the Avos HaKadoshim, Avram, the Torah fully reveals many aspects of his life, his beginnings, his experiences, and his accomplishments. Yaakov, also, relatively speaking, from the time he was born, we fast forward to the birthright, and then the Torah speaks very much in detail about Yaakov, how he fathers the tribes, and all his issues with his father-in-law, and how he flees, and how he comes back, how he goes to Egypt. Very much fleshed out and spoken about in detail. Avram also, maybe not to the same degree, but Yitzchak, relatively speaking, was almost an unknown entity. We speak about his birth. We speak about the Akedah. We speak about his marrying Rivka, the birthright. That's about all we know about him. But yet he's the patriarch. Even his lifetime, although God doesn't associate his name with anyone as long as he's alive, because because a person until the last moment of his life has free choice and he's able to turn, and God forbid, regardless of what level he was at, he's able to reject God. Hashem will not allow his name to be associated openly and identify with him, to say Elokei. So Elokei Avram was only after Avram passed away. Elokei Yitzchak was only Elokei Yaakov only after Yaakov passed away. Yitzchak, even in his lifetime, Hashem identifies himself as I am Elokei Yitzchak. So Rashi explains why he was blind. There's an argument in Midrash because of the Akedah, and therefore he had the evil inclination at bay. Therefore, even during his lifetime, so Yitzchak was so special, Elokei, but yet we know very little about him. So how do we have an inkling to know his dimension of being? Maybe he's less than the other patriarchs, although he's Elokei Yitzchak, as Elokei Avram, Elokei Yaakov. Maybe he's less to some degree. So Chaim HaKodesh explains the Vav here at the beginning of this portion. The previous parsha ended with Avram Avinu passing away, and Yitzchak and Yishmael burying their father in the Mors Machpelah. Then it continues, and it's a continuation. Yitzchak is a continuation of the life of his father, meaning there is no difference. I mean, they may have had assumed other approaches, how to emulate Hashem. As we know, Avram was the Amar HaChesed, was the pillar of loving kindness. Yitzchak was exactness, was din, and he wasn't involved as the others were involved with humanity, but nevertheless, in terms of his spiritual dimension, he was no less than they were. And that's connoted through the connecting Vav, Ve'ela. And there was Avram and there was Yitzchak. And Yitzchak is the equivalent of his father, although he reflects and magnifies another aspect of Hashem's characteristics. This is the Orach HaKodesh. That's Ve'ela told us Yitzchak ben Avram. And then the pasuk concludes, Avram holded his Yitzchak. So the question is, Rashi, Avram holded his Yitzchak. La'achar shekora HaKodesh Baruch Hu shmo Avram. Amakach told his Yitzchak. Akach told, meaning once you have the name change, meaning as Avram could not father the future patriarch of the Jewish people. It's Avraham. It's only once he became Avraham, had that hey added to his name, then he was able to father the patriarch. Now, we explained who is Yitzchak. The only time Avram was able to father Yitzchak, the future patriarch of Klal Yisrael, was only after he had that hay added to his name. What was the significance of the hay? We explained. The hay itself is the equivalent of all creation. For Avram to be able to be the patriarch and father the Jewish people, to meet the objective of creation, he had to have the hay, which was the basis for creation of the physical existence. Avram had to be recreated with that same energy of the hay to create a new world. So although Avram in his physicality was the same person, but his dimension of person, spirituality speaking, he was another dimension. He was the equivalent of a new creation. He was the equivalent of Adam pre-sin. Only because Avram was a new creation, was not putrefied with the evil of the Eitz Hadas. That's the only reason why he was able to create, father the future patriarch of the Jewish people, who are going to be worthy and qualified to receive the Torah at Sinai and have that special relation with God. So Abraham holds this Yitzchak. How do we understand the significance of Yitzchak? Yitzchak could only come about only as a result of that extra hay. So who is Yitzchak? Avram is a new being, but now that Yitzchak is born from birth as a result of the hay, and it was only because of that hay Yitzchak could be born. What is Yitzchak's value? Yitzchak's value is to establish and advance this new existence, to ultimately bring about the ultimate, which is the Jewish people. Because who was Yitzchak's son? Yaakov. Yaakov was the father of the 12 tribes, which is the Shiftei Kor, the tribes of God. Therefore, Avraham holds Yitzchak. To give us an understanding who Yitzchak is, as much as he's an unknown entity, nevertheless, it's Avraham. You needed that hay for Avraham to be able to bring that new entity, existence, into existence, which will be the father of Yaakov. But the question is, well, why don't we describe Yitzchak? It's true. Torah doesn't speak much of his life. But why doesn't the Torah discuss more in detail Yitzchak's life? So what we had said was, in the past, if you do want to describe a malach, an angel, Torah speaks about angels, what they are to a degree. But an angel, the Rambam in Hilchos Yesod Torah speaks about when a prophet has a prophecy and he visualizes an angel in his sleep state, and the angel speaks, because Hashem, whenever he speaks to a prophet, it's always through an angel. And he visualizes an angel. What does the angel look like? When the prophet sees the angel in his dream, what does the angel look like? So he explains, it looks like someone who has wings. As we read Yecheskel, the different angels, they have so many wings, their feet are one. The reason why when we say the Shemona Esrei, we keep our feet together, because angels have regalachas. They have 1 foot. The way the Navi sees the angel in his prophetic vision, it's 1 foot, not 2 feet. So we stand, when we have the audience with Hashem, we stand with our feet together. It's cited on Yom Kippur, people stand all day. Why? Because just as on Yom Kippur, our behavior is similar to angels. As the Gemara says, angels don't eat and drink. The Jews in Yom Kippur don't eat and drink. As angels have no bodily functions, on Yom Kippur, as a result of not eating and drinking, that aspect of a function is not really in operation. As angels don't procreate, a Jew is not permitted to be involved in procreation on Yom Kippur. As the language of the Jew is Lashon HaKodesh, is the Hebrew language, the language of Malachim, of angels, is Hebrew. This is the commonality between the Jew and the angel. As the angel stands and does not sit, the Jew on Yom Kippur stands as much as he can because we resemble angels. We wear the kittel, that's a white garment on Yom Kippur. As the angel is seen in white, the Jew is seen in white. So our whole behavior, our identity, Yom Kippur is similar to the Malach or Malachim. We say Baruch Shem Kvod Malach Malchusol Ved in Kriya Shema. Throughout the year, we say it in undertone. On Yom Kippur, we say it in an audible tone, because the Malachim, because we're like Malach, we're like angels. But that's about all we know about angels. He visualizes it. This is what he sees in his dream. But do we have any understanding what an angel is? It's not the realm of existence. It only manifests itself in this depiction because that's the only way a human being could actually relate to who's speaking to him. Yitzchak himself was the equivalent of a malach. He was a human being, but in terms of his level of exactness, being midas adin, his exactness, we have no relevance to understand. Although we don't understand Yaakov, we don't understand Avram, but in terms of their experiences and interactions and impact on the world, it was through their physical actions. Yitzchak wasn't through his physical actions. Because of his dimension of being, what he actually brought about was through who he was. And who he was, we cannot fathom who he was. We mentioned the name of Reb Chaim Volozhiner, that just in Pirkei Avos, that just as a Jew or every human being is made up of three parts. We have a nefesh, we have a ruach, and we have a neshama. We have a life source, we have a spirit, and we have a soul. So too Klal Yisrael has a life source, a spirit, and a soul. Who was the soul? Who was the spirit? Who was the life source of Klal Yisrael? The life source of Klal Yisrael was Avraham Avinu. Life source gives us the ability. That's the most element aspect of our physicality, movement, function in terms of physicality. Who is the ruach? The ruach is Yaakov, because ruach has relevance to the articulation of Torah. Yaakov was Ishtam Yoshev Olim. He was the ruach of Klal Yisrael. Who was Yitzchak? Yitzchak was the neshama of Klal Yisrael. This is Reb Chaim Volozhiner. He was the soul. He was the Ola Tamima. He was the unblemished offering. Just as a korban, the slightest degree of impure thought of the Kohen invalidates the korban, that's how pure Yitzchak was. He represents the neshama. If you ask me, could you describe what your neshama is? Reb Chaim Volozhiner says, name of the Zohar, that the greatest angel cannot fathom the makeup of the Jewish soul. Yitzchak himself represents the neshama of Klal Yisrael as a founding patriarch. Therefore, the Torah cannot explain or in any way articulate anything that has relevance to what his essence was. Therefore, how do we know what he was in terms of his dimension of spirituality? Ve'ela tolos, no, Yitzchak. The Vav connects him to Avram. As Avram was at that special level, Yitzchak was no less at that special level, although we don't know who he was, but through that Vav, that reveals who he was, because he's not someone who could be described, because he's that level which is unfathomable. Why does it have to conclude Avram Hulidasitzok? If you show you Litzoni Ador Obrim Miyavimelech Nisabra Soro, because the deprecators of the generation were saying that who impregnated Sari Menu? Avimelech. Why? She was many years married to Avram, and she didn't conceive. She didn't become pregnant. And all of a sudden, one night, she's with Avimelech. All of a sudden, soon afterwards, we're informed she's expecting. So the deprecators of the generation said, so who is the father of Yitzchak? Avimelech, not Avram. Ma'osa Kodesh Baruch Hu. So what did Hashem say to dispel this? This should never be a consideration that the one who fathered Yitzchak is Avimelech. So Klesta Ponov Shel Yitzchak Domer Avram. He formed that the facial features of Yitzchak were identical to his father. As a result of that, anybody who saw Yitzchak, what did they say? There's no question. This is the son of Avram. Avram fathered Yitzchak. By looking at Yitzchak, you knew he was the father. V'zeh of Khan, Yitzchak ben Avram. Edus yesh. What is the irrefutable proof? Avram ben Yitzchak, because they looked identically the same. That's why the pasuk concludes Avram ben Yitzchak. So the way I always understood it was that I asked the question. Firstly, Sari Menu in prophecy was greater than Avram Avinu. And how does Hashem allow, or why does he allow, that this holy, pure woman, who in prophecy was greater than Avram Avinu, to enter into the clutches of this monster, this Avimelech, this heathen, where even when God came to him in this dream and told him, release the woman, she's a married woman, he comes and he defends himself against God. Do you take the innocent? I'm an innocent person. I did it due to my innocence. He said it was his sister. And God is telling you you're a bad guy. And you say, no, but I'm innocent. Is that the way you mistreat people? That's what he says to God. Why does Hashem even allow it? He allows it, and now all of a sudden Hashem has to, first of all, why should he be subjected to that? And now that he does, there's a question that God forbid that maybe he fathered the child of Sarah. And Avram is not the child. God has to perform a miracle that everybody should know that Yitzchak is the son of Avram because they look like identical twins. And as a result of that, Hashem has to introduce aging to existence that people should be able to discern between Avram and Yitzchak. And that's what we had last week's reading. Avram Zoki Boba Yomin. It's the first time aging is mentioned in the Torah because people couldn't differentiate between the son and the father. And now they understand who's Avram and they understand who Yitzchak is, although they look identical. One's aged is the father, the younger version is the son. Why? That's the question I asked. I asked them in the past. So what I always said was that we always speak about Avram being a counterbalance for Nimrod. Anytime you have a representation of good, there's always a counterbalance of evil. And one cannot exist without the other because you have to have free choice. So you always have to have the counterbalance. The day that Avram passed away, that's the day that Nimrod was killed. Because the world cannot continue for a moment. If there's no Avram, there cannot be a Nimrod. Because Avram was the counterforce to Nimrod. Who was the counterforce to Ishmael? Yitzchak. Who was the counterforce to Esav? Yaakov. Kol Yaakov, Esav. That was the counterbalance. If it would have been known without a question, beyond any doubt, and nobody even questioned the pedigree of Yitzchak, when he would be born and he becomes that effective person on the world, on the global level, he would ride the coattails of his father, and nobody would even question his pedigree without a question. So what do people say? No, this is definitely the son of Avram. Why? He looks identical like his father. It's impossible it should be the son of Avimelech. But you know something? You may have every answer in the world, but my question is still a question. Here they were married for many years. She didn't conceive. All of a sudden, she spends one night with Avimelech. All of a sudden, it becomes known she's pregnant. So people say, it's true, he looks like him, identical, but you never know. You never know what impacts and what affects that. Maybe truly he's the son of Avimelech. As a result of that, Yitzchak's effectiveness and value is diminished and compromised because of this kind of remark, or because this kind of question which could be asked. So Avram, and so to maintain the balance of existence, that Yitzchak shouldn't have that overwhelming force that he can't be countered. Therefore, Hashem allows this scenario to unfold to minimize the level of influence Yitzchak has, that he's really an independent player rather than having the full force of his father behind him. That's the way I always understood it. That's why Hashem allowed this to come about, and therefore Yitzchak had to be born looking exactly like his father, and ultimately the aging process had to be put into place so people should discern between Avram and Yitzchak. That was my answer always. Okay? However, in last week's Medrash, I saw Medrash Tanchuma for the first time. Maybe I saw it before, but it resonated with me. The Medrash says differently. Avram Avinu said, it says at the end of time, the Medrash doesn't say this, it's Gemara in Sota, that there's certain indicators of Messianic times. One of the indicators will be, which we see today, the youth will not respect their elders. So what's so terrible? Because you have to have role models, and when you have elders, they're the role models for what? For the youth. Once the youth no longer respect their elders, you don't have those role models. So therefore, Avram Avinu asked Hashem, he should introduce aging, so in humanity, the young should respect their elders, that the elders should be the role models for the youth. That was the reason. Not because Avram Avinu would be actually, they'll think Yitzchak is Avram, Avram's Yitzchak. It's true, it was a problem, but that wasn't the thrust of it. Because Avram says, because it's important the youth should respect their elders, and if people can't discern between the father and the son, because everybody looks the same age, that value doesn't exist, and it's integral for the world to evolve and develop, that the youth should respect their elders.